I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah. That is what I heard them say way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, yeah, we have sorely changed. I'll be buried in my grave before I become a slave, yeah, yeah. That is what I heard them say, yeah. Way back in the day. I'll be buried in my grave, yeah, before I become a slave, yeah, yeah, yeah. But it seems like since that day, yeah, we have sorely changed. Whoa. Hey, hey. Whoa, oh, 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 oh. Whoa, oh, 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 oh,
And now, live from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, you're watching My Fellow Americans with your host, Spike Cohen.
Yes, it's me. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you. Keep clapping. Thank you, thank you. Clap for the miracle. How would we know that you wanted the miracle if you didn't keep clapping? Welcome to My Fellow Americans. I am literally Spike Cohen. Thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday, the 16th of June. This year is almost halfway over. I am not ready to process that at even remotely at all, and I doubt you are either. So thank you for joining us here. This is a Muddy Waters media production. Check us out on all of the social media platforms. Check us out on all of the podcasting platforms. Check us out on muddywatersmedia.com, and of course check us out on anchor.fm/muddiedwaters. Be sure to like and share and subscribe and comment and do all of the different things that help boost us in the algorithm. And of course, if you're subscribing to us on YouTube, hit the bell. You have to hit the little bell. If you don't hit the bell, your phone won't blow up with notifications every time we go live. I do not want you to miss out on this. And again, be sure to share this. The last thing that I want is for you and your closest loved ones to miss out on an hour-long libertarian podcast on a Wednesday evening. Give the gift of Spike today. Kids love it. The sponsors of this show is brought to you by the Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus, the fastest growing Waffle House related caucus in any political party ever. I didn't check that, but it has to be. If you want to become a member, go to the Facebook group Libertarian Party Waffle House Caucus, or if you want to get some buttons and become an official voting member, whatever that means, go to muddywatersmedia.com/store and get your buttons today. The Gravy King, Cumberland Cannabis CBD products based out of Cumberland County, Tennessee. If you go to cumberlandcannabisco.com, you can get all of the different CBD gummies and edibles and tinctures and all sorts of other stuff to help you with joint pain and relief and a much-needed pick-me-up and all that stuff. Go to cumberlandcannabisco.com. Literally what's written there, but you add a com at the end. Joe Solosky is running for Pennsylvania governor. Joe Solosky is the key to Pennsylvania success. And if you'd like to help him in becoming the first libertarian governor of any state ever, go to Joe Solosky, that's JoeSoloski.com to help him today. the most aptly named sponsor that we have ever had before, which is, of course, Mud Water, brought to you by Muddy Waters. Mud Water, coffee alternative. If you woke up today and said, man, I never want to drink coffee another day in my life. I instead want to drink, oh, you can't read the top of the thing, a coffee alternative that has nothing in it but masala chai, cacao, I don't know what cacao is, but cacao, mushrooms, turmeric, sea salt, cinnamon, and literally nothing else. Well, folks, I have some fantastic news for you. If you go to muddywatersmedia.com/mud, you, yes, you, can go and get a tin that this person in the hand bottle is holding of mud water. And I do take mud water. I do use mud water. And it tastes, I mean, coffee doesn't taste good either, so this tastes about the same. But it has 1/7 of the caffeine of coffee. Put that in perspective. It is 8 p.m. I'm still this wired off of 1 cup of mud water. Imagine what I would have been like on coffee. So be sure to go get some mud water today.
Folks,
and of
my
course,
guest tonight.
That's the wrong thing. And then, of course, Jack Casey, author of the books The Royal Green and Silver Throned, which is, I've never read these books. Whatever they're about, I'm sure they're great. And I'm sure Jack Casey would love for you to buy them because that puts money in his pocket. So be sure to go to theroyalgreen.com today to buy these books. And of course, coming summer of 2021, his third book, Crowned by Gold, is coming out. I also don't know what that one's about. I'm never going to read these books because if I read them and they're bad, I'm going to feel bad for trying to get you to buy them. And if they're good, I'm going to feel bad that I, promoted them this way because this is terrible. And finally, of course, personal injury attorney Chris Reynolds, attorney at law. If you are if you are in Florida, which I just got back from, if you are in Florida and you find yourself personally injured, you can contact Chris Reynolds and he will sue them for you, and you could get money from that. I don't know that you're going to get money from that, but there's at least a 50-50 chance, probably, I don't know, that there's at least even odds that you could end up getting money from suing someone because they did something to you, if it's not a frivolous case. So go to chrisreynoldslaw.com. Well, he wouldn't take a case if it was frivolous. So you have at least a 50-50 chance, probably even better than that. chrisreynoldslaw.com. The intro and outro music to this and every single episode of My Fellow Americans comes from the amazing and talented Mr. Joe Davi, Jodavi. Check him out on his Facebook. Go to his SoundCloud. Go to his Bandcamp, jodavimusic.bandcamp.com, where you can listen and stream and buy his entire discography. It's like $25. It's hours of music. You'll love all of it. Go there now. Well, no, don't go there now. Go after this is over. Watch this entire thing in its entirety all the way to the very end. Then when it ends, go to jodavimusic.bandcamp. Thank you so much, Joe Davi. I'd like to thank Le Bleu for this delicious, purified drinking water that I'm drinking on this episode. Bulubanaka. I just realized this is the first water I've drank since I got home. The last time I drank water, I was in Florida. Shout out to Tehran Turks' mom and him as always. Folks, as you probably know, this Saturday is the 156th anniversary of Juneteenth. Juneteenth is the day that the slaves that lived in Texas were informed 156 years ago. Years after the Civil War had ended, they were finally informed that they were free from chattel slavery. And pretty much as soon as that ended, as soon as they were informed, they went straight to work building up their communities and creating communities, building free colonies across Texas and really across the country, but especially in Texas. But there are times that the people that went there and amassed great wealth and great property had people in positions of government come and steal their property from them. My guest tonight is a descendant of one of these people that had their property stolen from them. She is also the author of Colored River, and she is here to talk about her and her family's fight for recognition of what happened and for justice and hopefully recompensation. Ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, please welcome to the show Dr. E. Henderson Lawson. Dr. Lawson, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you here. And folks, be sure to tune in with your thoughts and questions. And Dr. Lawson and I will tell you if you are right or wrong. Now, Dr. Lawson, before we get started with the story, if you can tell, you don't have to get too personal, but tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a doctor of some kind. You've gone through school. Tell us about what led to you even finding out about this story. What is the genesis story of how you even found out that something had happened?
Well, Spike, it started when I was a little girl. I'd heard uncles and older relatives mention that our land was stolen, and I didn't give much thought to it. It just kind of went in one ear and out the other. Um, but in 2016, some cousins, we met at one of my cousins' house, and we were just sitting around going through obituaries, and one of our family historians was there, and she had a lot of pictures, and she proceeded to tell stories about our family. And it was just at that moment that those memories came back to me. And I decided to start looking at my family's genealogy. And so I started there. I went home and I Googled my grandfather, and I found some information about him. And so I Googled my great grandfather, and I found a death certificate for him. And then I ventured to Google my great great grandfather. And when I put his name in, a court case came up. And of course, all of the thoughts came rushing back to me, all the memories of when I was a little girl.
Hmm.
And so I just couldn't believe that I saw his name. And so I called some cousins up, and we went on down to the courthouse. And after two times going down, because I didn't know anything about pulling those files, I'm a doctor of education, by the way. And I got the case, and I came home and I read and I saw his name and wasn't sure still. It was the county that our people were from. And so I went ahead and joined Ancestry. Here's a plug for Ancestry.com. I joined Ancestry.com and put in all of the names and saw that it was five Black men and two white attorneys. And they were asking, there was another family that were heirs of a name that was on the map that said that the Republic of Texas had granted them the land. And as I continued to look at this, I realized I need to go back and do some studying about Texas history. So that led me to researching Texas in a way that I'd never looked at Texas before, and in a way that had never been taught to me in public school or college at any time. And I was able to put together, based on that case, which I thought at the time was the only case, but there ended up being three other cases and seven conspirators from the beginning to the end of the cases that actually robbed the family, not just my family, but many Black families in the same county in Texas. And so I decided that I would continue to research. And as I continued to research, family members started giving me more information. And that information led me on a journey of writing. And so I just kept writing. And one day, a cousin, I didn't know it was a cousin, reached out to me on Ancestry. So if you know anything about Ancestry, you're able to communicate via Ancestry and send messages.
Right.
And so a cousin reached out to me and said, I didn't know he was a cousin because his name wasn't my last name. It wasn't Henderson. And he reached out and said, hey, I see you have a picture of my grandmom on your family tree, and I'd like to talk to you. I'm writing a book. And I said, wow, I'm writing too. So we communicated in the first day, because I didn't know how or where my writing was going. I just knew that I was writing, and we were
Right.
writing the same story.
Oh, wow.
And so he said, let's collaborate with this because we're right here together writing the same story. We know, all of our family knows. And so we started writing together. So Dr. Kennedy um, is my co-author, and so our story, my Colored River, tells the story of our family and how my great grandfather, his father, was actually an Irishman, and he actually fought in the Battle of San Jacinto. So we were able to get records showing this, and you know, following the history of Texas and putting in context what was happening in Texas, and following the emancipation of the slaves, as you stated, many Black families were able to amass land because they knew how to work the land,
Right, right,
and
right.
it was just an unfortunate string of events that led to them losing their land. Um,
Well, let's talk about that. So Jim Henderson is your great great grandfather, is that correct?
yes,
Okay, so Jim Henderson was correct me if I'm wrong, he was a freed slave who began a free colony of other black people, of other freed slaves. And as you said, and this is something we've actually talked about on my other show, we've talked about the fact that when you look at a lot of the storytelling about, or the things that have been written about slavery and the post-slavery era, it understandably and justifiably so focuses on the oppression. It focuses on the continued harm that happened in the sharecropper era, and the continuation of abuses that happened, so that for many black people in that time, it was almost as though slavery either hadn't ended or hadn't really gotten that much better. What isn't talked about a lot is that there were many black people who were able to, because as you said, because they had incredible skills, because they had incredible work ethic, because they had been treated like cattle, and now were able to exert themselves and exert their own bodily autonomy, and be able to build wealth for themselves. They hit the ground running, and accumulated vast amounts of property and wealth, sometimes becoming wealthier than some of the white inhabitants of the same counties. And so that led to the creation and the growing of Freestone County, the Freedom Colony there. What can you tell us about that colony and what that was like?
so first let me tell you something. When Texas became a republic, one of the first things that they made sure of is that no Black would be free. And I mean, that was the whole reason they fought, right? They wanted to keep their slaves.
Right,
And
right,
so Jim Henderson was a slave on paper, but um, his father was white. And so with his father being in the position that he was in, the story as it was told to me, family members, and we have some written documents from family members that we were able to capture and put in the book. Um, it was a he was a in the state of Texas, he was considered a slave, but he had gotten some land from his father, and we can see his father's land not far from his land. Um, so there was a gentleman by the name of E.A. Maher who actually came through after the second Reconstruction. He was able to come in and give titles to the Blacks because at this time they could legally own land. So
right.
the titles that Jim Henderson had were giving him the rights, all rights to his land. And he continued to fight for his land, but he just couldn't beat the system. So the community that Jim Henderson founded, the Bethel community, our cemetery is still there. It's still sitting on the land. We can get to the cemetery, but we can't get to the land. We can only get to the cemetery. And Bethel is only one of many freedom colonies that are in Freestone County. It's the one that just happens to be where Jim Henderson had amassed most of his land.
Mm-hmm.
But we see through the court cases, it was about greed. so many Blacks lost land. We have record of that. It's in the court records, it's open records. And so the research and to be able to do what Jim Henderson couldn't do, he couldn't read, he couldn't write. He had to rely on the system, and the system did not, the system wasn't in his favor.
Right.
And so this community, we can see the churches, even some of them are, we have pictures, they're dilapidated, they're still there. We can't get to where his house is because it's contained, it's still contained on this land. So we can see it, we can identify it, we have legal descriptions, but that's about all we can do.
So Jim Henderson's father was an Irishman, and maybe this might be and I apologize if this is a crass question to ask. Was Jim Henderson's father also his previous owner when slavery
Yes.
existed? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yes, as a matter of fact, because in Texas, you had to go before Congress. This was the first thing that they wanted to make sure of when Texas became a republic, is that
Right.
no one Black would be free in the
Right.
state of Texas. And so his father was the one who, on paper, enslaved him. But of course, he didn't treat him nor his mother, Zilly, harshly at all.
So it was basically a family, but he used the legal cover of being their owner to justify them being a family, basically.
Right. And they were pretty much left alone until Hugh Henderson died, his father, and
Right.
E.A. Maher died, who was the person who was given titles to the Blacks in this community. When he died, that is when the land theft conspiracy began.
Okay. So that's when it all fell apart. Okay. So then,
Yes.
so up until this point, Jim Henderson and other freed Black families are building colonies. Jim, at this point, Jim has, correct me if I'm wrong, thousands of acres of land, correct?
Correct.
So like
Correct.
more land than anyone watching this ever hopes to have. That he had a
Right.
vast swath. This is you talk about a rags to riches story. You go from slavery to being such a hard worker and such having such a great mind for enterprise that you now own the equivalent of a small county. And so so he has all this land, he has all this property, and he's built it up. And this is supposed to be the American dream, right? Not the slavery
Right.
part, but the part about you start from, you come with nothing, or in this case you are freed with little to nothing, and you build up and grow your legacy, and you're able to pass on that generational wealth to future generations so that they don't have it as hard as you do, so that they have a legacy to build upon, so that they can pass that generational wealth on to their future generations, and so that there is this accumulation of wealth through the institution of that family, so that eventually those people are able to live in essentially whatever level of luxury they want. But instead, there were people who decided they were just going to steal it. Can you walk us through how that actually worked? What was the process of taking this man, this ostensibly free man, and robbing him of everything he had worked so hard for?
Okay, absolutely. First of all, we must remember that during this time, Blacks were not allowed to go to school, so they were pretty much formally uneducated. But I know that Jim was highly intelligent because he was able to amass great amounts of land and keep it. So if you had to think of a timeline, I would say, okay, so we know that the emancipation happened Juneteenth, 1865. Everybody's caught on to that by now.
Right.
1870 is the first time we can see Blacks on the census. So we see Jim and we see his children on the census on the land for the first time in 1870. Now, if you're looking at a timeline, go all the way to 1896. In 1896, there was a man who was the inspector of lands who conspired with an attorney who remained a part of this land theft conspiracy until the end. And basically, they said to each other, "Let's go." There were so many blacks on this survey of land, in
Right.
they wanted to know, let's see if we can figure out a way to get them out. Now, the way I know this is because the attorney at the time that was conspiring with the inspector of lands wasn't actually selected initially. He was selected initially to work with the inspector of lands to acquire the land, find out who owned the land based on not the based on the survey. So this survey, the J.Y. Aguilera survey, we had to go back and do some research on this survey. So basically, they said all of these blacks are on this land. Let's find out who owned it before them, right? And so they go to Mexico, because I had to go back and understand that land grants were given between April 6, 1830 and 1834. During that period of time,
The homesteading of Mexico yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
During that period of time, well, there was 7 land grants given in Freestone County. So on one of those land grants, which is where we spend most of our time researching, the J.Y. Aguilera survey, is where we find this land theft conspiracy beginning. And so when he once the attorney, once the land inspector found had surveyed the land out and went to Mexico to find out who this land grant had gone to, he came back, but the attorney, he didn't select him. He selected another attorney. Okay. And so the initial attorney was upset. And so he filed a complaint, and it's on file. And so when I got the paper of it being on file, it explained how he was so upset that they were going to find the original owners of this land, and they were going to give half of the land to them, and then they were going to split the other half. And so this attorney was upset and said, "You found another attorney and you've left me out, and I am due 1/4 of whatever is not already encumbered by people that are already on the land."
Right.
So the attorney that was to take his place didn't care about that complaint. He went ahead and filed a lawsuit against the people that had inherited the land and that had gotten their titles from E.A. Maher. So the lawsuit was against the descendants of E.A. Maher, who at this time had died. So his wife was in court. The attorney was actually representing the Mexican family that was in Mexico now. He brought them back and said, "This is your land," even though there was a power of attorney form on file, which I have a copy of, that gave this same man, E.A. Maher, the power to distribute the land. He was the land agent for this family, the Masu family, as well as he had power to give this land away because his name is the one that's on the land grant. Because of a succession of events that happened, which we went and researched. How did J.Y. Aguilera end up not owning the land? How did it end up in the hand of the Masu heirs? We asked that question, and so went back, and there's the information on the grant itself saying that J.Y. Aguilera owed Masu money, and he gave him this 11 leagues of land, which is about 48,748 acres.
Okay.
And so in between the time that Texas became a republic, this land, of course, things happened. And then, of course, Texas started giving out their own grants as a republic. And then, of course, when it became a part of the United States, it started giving out land. So you could see how you could say, well, it could kind of get confused and it could kind of get blurred. But what I want you to remember is E.A. Maher had gotten the land from his father, Jose Maher, because I don't want to go so deep into Texas history, but
right.
David Burnett was the first interim president for Texas. So he had the Burnett's colony, and it encompassed the entire Freestone County. And so here we have Burnett's colony, which he couldn't settle. And so he ended up selling it to the Texas Galveston Land Company. And that land company, the part that Jose Maher ended up getting, it was he and two other gentlemen, was encompassed Freestone County. So Jose Maher was executed because of his role in the Battle of Santa Anna. Did not like him because he wasn't for
Santa he was Anna's killed by Santa Anna during the
So he was executed. So before he died, he actually willed everything he owned to his son E.A. Maher. So I don't know if you've ever in Texas, you can ride through Maher. The Mahers had all of this property, and it's so much so they have a whole county named after them. And Maher, if you come to Texas, it's still here. So they get to court. And so you have this attorney who's saying the Massou heirs illegally own this property, and you have Maher's wife saying, no, we own the property. So it was the attorney representing the Massous and against the Mahers. So the judge said, and this is in writing, and this is in, not only is this in writing, this is in the minutes from the court. And there's also an affidavit stating that E.A. Maher's wife attested to people that were already on this property, which included Jim Henderson at the top. Right. And the judge said he would give a part of the land to the Massou heirs, a part of the land to the Maher heirs,
right? But
do not bother the pioneers who are already on the land. That's what this whole conspiracy, this is where it came from. We have in writing the judge saying, do not bother the families that have already encumbered the land. Right. And we have the affidavit stating who's on the land. But then you have this attorney who disregarded what the judge said and went ahead and created fake vendor liens and forced these Blacks to sign these vendor liens under duress. And so that's where the conspiracy started. So they would go on the land and say, I own this land, not you.
Right.
And then they would take them to court and say, I own the land. And so during that time, the period of Reconstruction was political Reconstruction was pretty much over, and Jim Crow had set in, and there was a lot of fear going on. Some of the cases were happening at the same time the Slocum Massacre was happening in a neighboring county of Anderson. And so we realized that there was a lot of stress associated with this.
Yeah, it was a backdrop of threats of violence and real violence happening right next door, and angry white people showing up saying, sign this or there's going to be problems. So it wasn't like they just decided to sign this. Yeah.
Yes. And so, one of the most amazing things that I was able to capture during the research for the final case, which started in 1913, was there was an answer from Jim Henderson in the case, and it was never read. And we know it wasn't read because, again, there are court minutes that indicate that the three white guys that were his attorneys, in the minutes, it said, we rescind Jim's answer. And then they called for Jim and they said, okay, he defaulted. But in his answer, which we can see because it's still on record in Freestone, he said, I am an illiterate Negro. This is fraud. He
Right.
said, they came up on the land and said to me that if I do not sign these papers, that they would take all of my land. And they know full well that this is my land. And they did know full well because they're the two people, these same two attorneys that were fighting him for the land were the same two attorneys who had defended him in the case that I found online that you can Google.
So
You
the
can
so the
Google the
attorney.
case.
So then the attorneys that threatened him and said either sign this or we're going to take all of it, then turned around and represented him and said we're rescinding his answer and then said he defaulted. Why were they his attorneys in the first place? Were they appointed attorneys or how did that happen?
Okay, back up right quick. Okay,
Okay, sorry.
remember when I said the first attorney came in and then the second attorney came in and they were kind of against each other at
Yeah,
first.
yeah.
And then they start conspiring together. So the land
Oh,
inspector died. The one that
yeah,
started this, the land inspector, he died.
yeah.
And then we found out through genealogy and through ancestry that the reason why he picked the other attorney and not the first one was because he was married to his niece. So I was like, oh, now I see by doing their
Right,
family
right.
tree that there was a family connection. However, as soon as they started with the fake vendor liens, the heirs that popped up and said, for the case you can Google, and I sent you a link to that case that you can Google today in 2021. That case, these same two attorneys who were fighting, who were saying the Masood people own the land and were against them, that happened in 1897. The case actually started in 1900. In 1901, out of the blue, comes some people saying our ancestor owns 1/3 of 11 leagues of land, and these blacks were up on the land when we got here, and it's our land. That was a true case. So they had to hurry up and get over there to try to get that back into their hands so that they could steal it, which is the only way you could think of it, because they defended them. Both of these attorneys defended the blacks in this case, 5 black men. They defended them in this case. And so then they absolutely knew that this was their land and turned right back around in the next case. So while this case was going on, let me just tell you a little bit about that case right quick. During this case, these heirs of Tobias Du Bronner, if you look at a map of East Texas, you'll see a part that says Tobias Du Bronner. The heirs of Tobias Du Bronner brought this case to court and said that when they came up on the land around 1895 or 1896, they saw these people here, which verifies that they were there. Right. Right? And so
we saw black
they said
people there. That means that they were there, right?
Yeah, they're there. We saw them there. They're there. And they even said they showed us some title from E.A. Maher stating that they own the land. But we are saying that we own the land because the state of Texas gave it to our ancestor. So the judge in that case said, you cannot say that just because you didn't know that there was this Mexican land grant that you are owners of it. So he allowed, the black should have been victorious. It was a victory, hands down. The heirs of Tobias Du Bronner came back and said, we want to appeal this. We have all this and we have the cases. We want to appeal this, and lost again. So you would think, oh, yeah. No, not so fast. While this case was going on, because they were so busy defending the blacks, in this case, Jim Henderson at the top, while they were so busy defending them, they had started that whole thing with the vendor liens that was rolling, right? So they couldn't do anything. They were tied into this case because they appealed. So they have brought in this land capitalist. So the land capitalist comes in and says, I own 21,412 acres of land. It was 2 white men in there, and the rest were blacks. The 2 white men go out and get an attorney. They got an attorney, and their attorney, which I can see in the case, questioned, how are you filing a suit against these people? And he was looking at the Kachili case. He was looking at the case that they were being appealed and going through all of that. He was looking at that. And we have a letter where he wrote to Freestone County and asked, could you send me the information about the Kachili case? And then he made a statement and said, it seems to me that this attorney is just trying to get everybody to default. So they dismissed the two white land, they dismissed their cases and defaulted on all of the blacks in one day.
In the same day, they dismissed the case on the whites, and they defaulted the blacks' land over to the attorneys.
Absolutely. And guess who the attorney was for all the blacks? You guessed it. The same one of the attorneys that simultaneously in the courtroom defending them for 1/3 of 11 leagues. And on the other side, with the land capitalists, was the other person, the other attorney, being a witness for him. They never got out of it. So in the final case, these two attorneys sued these blacks with their names on the cases. And this was the last piece of land that my ancestor, Jim Henderson, owned. And it had a lake on it. And it had his homestead on it. And it says it in his response in the answer that was never read.
Right.
That I built my home here.
Right.
And they know well that they never owned this land. And then he said, and my wife, Nancy, never signed. So she still should have interest in this property. That's how I know he was intelligent.
Right.
And so you know what happened? Before that case was over, Nancy was dead. I've gone down myself to Freestone to look for her death certificate. We can't find her body. We can't find a death certificate, nothing. And we know that 3 of the sons were murdered. One was beat senseless. I mean, it was just so very emotional writing the book because,
I can only imagine.
You know, I've heard these stories, I'm hearing these stories, I'm researching, I'm going to Ancestry and seeing my ancestor in prison for 12 days and then seeing dead on the prison record. You know, I know they hung my great uncle my great uncle Walter Priest, his descendants. We know where we are. We know our family. This has brought us so much closer together that we have located the 8 of Jim's children that had children, and we've come together and we talk about this, and it's very painful.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it's very painful to just know that this was all done for greed, you know. And so Colored River tells this story as much as we can tell. It goes through the cases, it goes through Texas history. You know, I put a little bit in there just so context would be given to, because I knew if I didn't have it in my mind about what was happening in Texas so clear, that others probably wouldn't either, because, you know, school was such a joke for me when it came to the history of Texas. When I woke up, this was all about slavery. What?
Yep.
This was all about keeping slaves and King Cotton.
So this is, and this, before I ask about, well, I guess I'll start by asking, so the property now, you said that you can't get to the land, but but you can still see the graveyard. What is on that land? Well, I guess it's thousands of acres, so it's probably many things. What's on that land now?
So one of the other conspirators in this case, I call him the puppet master.
Okay.
Because from the beginning, he was behind the scenes pulling strings, right? So when they came out with those vendor liens, when that attorney came up with the vendor liens, don't try to make logical sense of this.
Right.
He and the county clerk came together and I don't know, they were the ones who bought these vendor liens, so to speak. That's what they said. They bought them. We don't find that out until the last case. and they pop out of nowhere as interveners and say, we own, you two attorneys are saying you own the land, but we own half. We own half, and you guys own half the land. So it was Jim, two of his sons, and then there were other 6 other Black families. The attorneys, this is the case where Nancy ended up dead before the case was over. So the attorneys gave the other Blacks some of their land back, but not Jim and his 2 sons. And so one of our family members is a descendant, and these families are so interconnected, but one of our family members is also a family member to one of the other victims of this, Alan Davis. And so Alan Davis was given back 14.5 acres from his 100 acres. So they still own this 14.5 acres today. Okay. That's the only piece of land we know. Hey, don't say this didn't happen.
Because
don't say this didn't happen, because they're paying taxes still today on it.
There's this one
but
piece
as
of Black
for
owned land
ours,
there,
we can't get to it. What did you say, Spike?
No, I was just saying there's this one piece of Black owned land there, and,
yes.
And that's what you can trace everything back to.
Yes, and it's on the deed. It's still on the warranty deed as referred to in that case that started in 1913. So there's no question about the legitimacy. And of course, the most important thing is the cases are still on file in Freestone.
And so I'm assuming there is some kind of, is there a statute of limitations on this, or are you trying to piece together the history so that you can try to get recompensation for this? Or what, is there is it past a point of trying to secure some kind of justice for this and just trying to tell the story, or is there still an attempt to actually get compensation for what happened?
Okay, so Spike, so when we started this story, both my co-author and I, it's like we were being bothered in our spirits about writing this story, because we know how many of our ancestors cried, prayed, died behind justice. Yeah. So our whole point in writing the book was to tell the story America needs to know. We always hear about land theft, land loss, Black land loss. We know that there was a tremendous amount of 98% of the Black land was lost after 1910. Everything coincides with what was happening there. We've had other family members who attempted to speak out about this. I would say that there was a period of time where our family members, they had the story, but they couldn't quite articulate it in a way. Right. They couldn't put it in writing. It was just told. It was just oral stories. And then you have a population of people that could write, but they didn't know the story. So now here is the perfect time. And our book came out before all of the attention was put on righting the wrongs of what has happened to Blacks in America. And it just coincided the time. So the main point of our story was to tell the story. We don't know what tide this will take. We're not expecting we're not out on a witch hunt to hunt people down, but we do feel like we've been wronged. We feel like our inheritance was stolen from us. We don't know. We know that laws have been set up. It's a system. You have 25 years or whatever to say something about it. Well, within those 25 years, we were still under the same system that didn't want to hear from you. They don't want to hear from you. So you're talking about county officials. That's what sets this case apart. These people were working for the county clerk. I mean, these people, he opened up an abstract company in the courthouse where he's responsible. What does the county clerk do? They're responsible for keeping up with deeds and all of these official records, birth certificates, death certificates. We can't find a death certificate for Jim Henderson. We can't find any information on Hugh Henderson besides his military records and the stories that have been left to us that we were able to now tell in a way that people can understand and put it in writing. And so we don't know which way the story will go. I assume, just like the people in Tulsa, they didn't know which way their story would go. They still don't know.
Right.
Just like the people on Bruce's Beach, they didn't know which way the story would go. But your responsibility is to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't know. We know years later there was so much oil, ignite, coal, all kinds of minerals on the land. I mean, talk about the reason for an economic wealth gap. Land loss is at the top. And frankly, there hasn't been much that anyone could do about it. I mean, we didn't have a voice. So how do you give 25 years when the 25 years that you're talking about, people are still struggling with illiteracy, you know? And so I feel honored, and I tell my family all the time, this to me is a gift to my family to finally tell them what happened in writing, so that even when I'm not here, the story has been written. It's documented, and I made sure to put notes in the back of the book so that anyone who wanted to say, well, no, that didn't happen, that they have a way to go back for themselves and go and do their own research.
Yeah. So this is a story, and I mean, you want to talk about a wealth gap. This is a story of why there's a wealth gap, basically, as told through a single family. You have someone,
Yes,
and multiple families there, the descendants of generations of people who were
yes,
brought from their homeland, treated like cattle, robbed of their identity, of their heritage, treated basically one step above animals, if you can even call it that, robbed of literally generations of labor. It's hard to calculate what that would be worth now once you compound the interest and everything else. It's in the trillions. And this is a group of families who were allowed to now not be slaves, immediately start amassing wealth, immediately
yes,
start building wealth, and going, not looking back at any of the stuff that was robbed of them in previous generations, not feeling bad for themselves, not just immediately start, they're building wealth, right? Pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, as we say. And the response to that is that you had a handful of people who used the power of government and their connections to systematically rob them of all or almost all of their property, and to, as far as we can tell, kill anyone, or at least potentially the possibility that they were also killing, but certainly intimidating anyone. And if they were also killing people, that would be quite a way to intimidate other people to make sure that the robbery happened. And they are doing this to people who, by law, again, power of government, are not allowed to have an education. And yet they were still smart enough, they were still intelligent enough to know something was wrong here. They were not allowed to learn how to read. Now, and again, this is I'm trying not to get on too much of a soapbox here, but a system that tells someone you are not allowed to learn what words say is a system that is codifying your victimization. Because what they're saying is, everyone else is allowed to know how to read and write and be able to participate in this legal system. You are not. You have to rely on someone else, or just show up without any paperwork and hope for the best. And so this is a story of the logical conclusion of what happens when that's allowed to happen. And your fight now to seek that justice, to, like you said, Bruce's Beach, the Greenwood community, Rosewood, all of these different communities, to tell that story of what happened, with the idea that, of course, we've seen what's happened in other cases. When that story comes out and people see what this really is, that this is not some abstract thing, this isn't Roots, this is an actual this is a human being. This is not an act of fiction. These are actual human beings that this happened to, and people who now are suffering from the fact that they were not allowed what would probably now be worth hundreds of millions or billions, or who knows, in amassed wealth. What happens when that happens? And so I hope that you are able to get the justice that you can. I'm not sure that you can fully get recompensated what was taken, simply because it would be impossible at this point. You know, one of the conversations about reparations is, well, you know, how are we going to pay for what is due? That's impossible. There is no way to pay the tens of trillions of dollars worth of labor and wealth that was stolen. So now what we're looking at is what can be given back. So whatever can be given back, I hope that you were able to get it, and I hope that you're able to find that justice. Tell people about where they can find this book. We've been putting the link to the book in it. Is there anyone? It's on Amazon. Is there anywhere else they can get it? You also have a website as well, right?
Yeah, coloredriver.com. They can get it there, or it's on Amazon. The Kindle version is on Amazon as well.
Okay, and we've just put the book, the link to coloredriver.com in the note in the comments as well. I usually go through the questions in the comments, but literally all of the comments have just been people that are just expressing shock at every bit of this story. You know, 40,000 acres. I can't believe that this happened. This is swindling. This is theft by fraud. One person said that they really like your eyebrows. Other than that, everything here, they think your eyebrows are beautiful. But everyone, her family is definitely due this compensation. This is literally just a bunch of people saying how dismayed and flabbergasted they are by this story. So, coloredriver.com. And the Amazon link is on there as well. I'm not even sure if this is a question or a comment, so I'm going to start talking and we'll find out together. Juneteenth coming up on Saturday, as you know, that is the anniversary of the freedom that was delayed to slaves that were in Texas. In a similar fashion, there is a justice delayed that is happening here, and hopefully it is not a justice denied. And I guess I just want to get your thoughts on that, and honestly, any final thoughts that you have. This is has been an amazing episode, and thank you for sharing this with us. And there is nothing I can say other than I'm sorry that this has happened, and I hope that this episode, and I hope that people hearing about this and reading it and telling others about it will help to spark that catalyst of getting the justice that you deserve. So, Dr. Lawson, I give you this chance to give your final words, to give anything you feel like we didn't get a chance to talk about, to plug any other events or books or anything else that you want to be able to share. Dr. E. Henderson Lawson, the floor is yours.
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me. This is my first time doing an interview. And one thing I wanted to say is we do hear a lot about reparations, but I like to use the word reclamations. How about let's get back to what you took that we can identify that's ours. And so,
Right.
yeah, you can be pretty ambiguous when you're talking about reparations, and I get it. How do you pay back all of this, and who gets it and who doesn't get it?
It's
But
impossible.
when you
It's
have a
impossible.
family that knows about what's theirs and we can see it and we can
Yeah.
follow the people who are enjoying it, that's pretty painful. And we know that our family members were murdered behind it, and we saw our family members cry. And we know that they pray, and we have several of them that are depending on our voices. And so this is an opportunity for our voice to be shared with America. And I have family that's behind me. They pray for me. They support me. They're researching with me, and I appreciate them. Some of them are here listening. We are very sensitive about how we're moving forward with this. And it's not for greed. It's not even for self gain. It's for justice. And so I'm just thankful that we've had this opportunity to come on and be able to share the story of what happened to our family. Something else I want to say is we're not against white people. So sometimes it can be misconstrued that because a group of people did the wrong thing, that
Right.
we're upset with white people. But we have sense enough to know how whites have helped blacks in from slavery on up, all through the Civil Rights Act. And so I'm thankful for people that can see this through another lens besides it being something about hatred for a race of people, even though that's what happened to us. So I would like to thank each and every one of you who've come on, and I would encourage you to grab the book and read about our family and what happened to our family. And my co author, he's been under the weather, or he would have been on here with me as well. But he wishes us well during this interview. So
That is
thank
great.
you so much, Spike, for having me. And I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Lawson. And yes, this is not about scapegoating all white
Yes.
people or any race or any, this is specific people did a specific bad thing to hurt people, to murder people, to take their land, this is definitely not greed. If someone comes and kills my family and takes my property, and I say, I'd like my property back, and I wish you hadn't killed my family, I'm not the one being greedy. So
Right.
no, this is about justice. This is about telling, first of all, it's number one, it's about acknowledging what even happened. And then second of all, from that acknowledgement, having a conversation, like you said, reclamation. Okay, great. This isn't some abstract discussion about how the system enslaved a race. Specific people did a specific thing to
Yes.
specific people, and there's a way to trace that and reclaim and repair from that specific thing that happened. But anyway, coloredriver.com. And we also have the link on Amazon, and I believe on your website it has the Amazon and the Kindle link and all of that stuff. Dr. Lawson, thank you so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate it. Stick around. I'd like to talk to you briefly during the outro, so if you can just stick around, I'd really appreciate it. Folks, thank you so much for watching this incredible, I guess, bittersweet episode of My Fellow Americans. You know, this is to talk to someone who is the descendant of someone who had this kind of harm inflicted upon him and upon them. I only hope that I hope that you were touched by this, watching at home or listening at home, and are inspired to get this book, to tell this story, and to help spread this message, because this is a perfect example. We've talked about Bruce's Beach on my social media, and as terrible as that was, that pales in comparison to this, in my opinion, anyway. And so I hope that you get the book. I hope that you share this story with others, and let's get some justice for this family, for the descendants of Jim Henderson and those who were harmed by this. As I said before, this is Juneteenth is coming up. Tomorrow on Thursday, the Writer's Block, my co-host Matt, on his show, I do not remember who his guest is. I do this every time. His guest is Travis Bull Johnson. He is running for Congress in Western Minnesota as a Libertarian, so be sure to watch that tomorrow at 8. Then on Friday, the 18th, I will be in Greensboro, North Carolina, for the start of the Libertarian Party of North Carolina's convention, and also the Juneteenth event that we are doing as part of that convention. That is going to be on Friday and Saturday, the 18th and 19th. If you go to spikecohen.com, you can find all the information there. On Sunday, we are going to be taking part in something called Pound the Pavement. Those who watch this show, you know what that means. We're going to be going out into the community in Greensboro and talking with folks there about our ideas, about our vision to set people free from wars and from cages and from undue criminal records, and what we stand for as libertarians. And if you live anywhere near Greensboro, or if any of you who have been a part of any of our Pound the Pavement events, you know how incredible and successful they've been. We hope to do the same in Greensboro. If you live anywhere near there, come on out and meet us. We'd love to do it. And then if you join us right back here next week for the Muddy Waters of Freedom, where Matt Wright and I parse through the week's events, you can join us here next Tuesday at 8. And then join me right back here next Wednesday, the 23rd. My guest will be Michael Bolden of the 10th Amendment Center. So, folks, again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Spike Cohen, and you are the power. God bless, guys.
my skin, my friend. In reality, you are my kin, though I view the world through another's iris. If you slide in my kicks, it might fit. We might just unite and come together, become hybrid, at the least slightly like-minded. Indeed, the life I've lived brings light to kindness. All you need is a sign. Put a cease to the crimes. Put an ease to the minds like mine. Sometimes darkness is all I find. You know what they say about an eye for an eye. In a time when the blind lead the blind, who am I to deny? I would cry when a loved one dies. I recognize that body outside, but the holes in the body that was alive. Now confined to a chalk outline. Find out how, but you never know why. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. It ain't even make it to the news at 9. That's my sister, mother, father, brother, son. That's one of mine. All these years I close my eyes, open up to only find